boyfriend. And, quite naturally, it got to this point where he wanted to hear more about her family. And rather than tell him the truth about her family, she broke up with him. And that repeated itself. That happened again and again, that anytime somebody was close enough to want to know more about who they really were, rather than risk the stigma that might come with that, they would break up or lose a friend or run away from an encounter in some way or another. There were frequently, we would visit their dad a lot, and things happen when you visit. Like I mentioned strip searches. I mean, when not infrequently, I mean, it wasn't all the time, but when, somebody would go, okay, Friedman, come behind the wall here, you need to be strip searched. And that's really traumatizing for a child to see their parent treated that way. And, the kids would cry and the girls would just be very upset. And then the next day they would go to school. And so I would get these reports from their teachers that were, child at risk reports. And we would get called in to go speak to the teachers. And I remember the girls just saying to me, you're not allowed to tell anybody about where dad is. And so I would be sitting at these meetings with the teachers, and all I wanted to do was say, listen, you need to understand what they just went through yesterday. We were in a prison visiting room, and here's what happened. And I would be, I joke, but it's not really a joke. I'd come out of those meetings with black and blue shins because they'd kick me under the table if it looked like I was about to
say something,
tell anything true. And, and I would say, well, Sarah's gone through a lot lately. And they'd say, oh, we have plenty of kids who are raised by single parents. Or, oh, we have plenty of kids who are children of divorce. And I would, and I'd just kind of say, well, it's a little more than that, right? But I was never allowed to say it. So this trauma was not only trauma, but it was hidden trauma.
Hidden, yeah.
And, they're separated from someone they love, and yet that person is considered, and I often talk about how when kids have parents in the services, in the armed services, people celebrate them and celebrate their parents. And, so it's really hard for those kids. They miss their parent on holidays and they miss them all the time, and they don't have dad there to say goodnight to or mom there to tuck them in. But they know their parent is considered a hero. Yes. Whereas these kids don't have mom or dad, or in some cases siblings to be there with them. And those people are considered less than human. Yeah. And so they can't even talk about their loss, what they're missing, what hurts, what's hard. So the manifestation of that, in one of my kids, it manifested in deep depression. My older daughter dropped out of school. That happens frequently because the strain of keeping that secret becomes too great. In one of them, she was very anxious. And to this, they're both adults now, and they still struggle. Like I said, the social isolation, the losing friends, and usually if they did tell a friend, the friends were pretty sympathetic, but they had learned when they were young, they were suddenly not allowed to go to people's homes, right? These were like the bad kids from the bad family. And so they didn't want to risk it. And heart spaciness, my older daughter would get spacey in school because she'd be thinking about some trauma she'd just endured.
Sure.
And not being able to pay attention to geometry.
Of course.
And so she'd do poorly in school. made me so unhappy and so kind of eager to find a way to help kids like them. So several years after my ex-husband and I divorced, I remarried, and my current husband, I call him, he's the last one. I'm done. my husband Dennis is a now just retired high school teacher, and when we first got married and I moved to Los Angeles to be with him, I began going into his classrooms to teach writing under grants from writing organizations. And in his classrooms, I mean, and he, because he's very close to my daughters also, and so he learned about this particular kind of trauma through them. We were both paying attention to are there kids who are going through this. So what would happen is, like, I would be working with a kid in a class, and he would say something like, well, my dad's not around, and we don't talk that much, or they would say certain things, and I would say to myself, prison.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was recognizing cues. Yeah. And then I was also reading the research where 1 in 14 children in the United States has a parent who is or has been incarcerated, which means in any classroom you walk into, there are likely to be 2 or more kids. Doesn't matter where you are. That's right. That's right. And so for years, Dennis and I had these conversations about what can we do for these kids. There must be some way we could provide support. And there is a long story to this that involves a student that Dennis had who kind of brought this home for him when he was arrested, and Dennis went to visit him and came home from that visit and said, my God, now I really understand what it means to visit someone you love in prison. And we just kept talking and talking about it. And finally one day, it was almost like a light bulb went off, but I said, think about what happens in schools when there are clubs for LGBTQ population. Mm-hmm. The whole way in which teenagers, and therefore as things happened, the whole society views gay and transgender and bisexual youth changed in 20, 25 years. And part of that, I think, grew out of the LGBTQ clubs in schools. So we found the man who started the very first club for gay students in America in 1988 in one high school in Massachusetts. We stole we asked if we could look at his original proposal, and we wrote a proposal for the school where Dennis was then teaching, which was Venice High School in Los Angeles, to start a club for kids in high school who had been impacted by prison, jail, or detention. And we used the premise of the original club for gay students, which was no one gets sent to this club. It's all self-selection. No one has to say why they're there, and there must be food. So,
I like that.
Food is, first of all, there's the one piece of the food is breaking bread with people breaks down boundaries.
Sure does.
But the other piece of it is kids can say, and frequently do, that they have just come for the food. Mm-hmm. It's an easy way to walk into the room. Sure. So we don't turn people away because they're there for the food. I mean, we figure, okay, probably hungry. And who knows, maybe there's a story, and maybe there isn't, but then they'll understand they don't belong and not come back, which will happen now and then. Most often what happens is kids come in and they say, I just came for the food. And they stay and then eventually explain that, oh, and by the way, my dad's been in prison since I was 2, or my brother was arrested when I was 11, or whatever the story is. And so that happened. The very first club was launched in 2013 at Venice High School. And my favorite story is
before you tell us your favorite story.
I can talk forever.
That's all right. I would love it if you would be able to come back and we can talk some more in depth about P.O.P.S, the club, because we're just, at the very beginning of its formation, and it's been around for a while, and I'd like you to tell us so much more, which I know you can do. So would you be willing to come back and talk to us again?
I would love to.
All right, wonderful. So I just want to say thank you to our listeners for spending some time with us today. I hope that you have gotten some insight into the impact of prison on children, and we will be talking about it for many weeks to come. Please come back and listen again, and stay safe.